I'm Lillian Money and I'm leader of Dumfries and Galloway Council. The Council continues to provide critical services right across the region in response to the coronavirus epidemic. We are updating our social media and our website regularly, but we have a new way of communicating with you. We are going to introduce a series of webinars which will be question and answer led sessions on a number of topics including children and young people, business support, community support and staffing issues. This will be your chance to get answers to the questions which you want to ask. I hope you enjoy taking part in the webinar. By working together, we will defeat COVID-19. Thank you for taking part.
Good evening, everyone. We'll just give everyone a few moments to get logged in and make sure you can hear and see us. Unfortunately, the nature of a webinar means you might not get the best picture or sound quality throughout the whole session. Please bear with us as far as possible. It's also worth noting that we have a recording of this question and answer session available a couple of days after. So if you have got any technical problems during the live session, you'll be able to watch it back. Okay, we'll just get going. Hello and welcome to our second live public webinar. Whether you're joining us live or are indeed watching or listening back, I hope you find this a useful communication tool and a way of getting your questions answered. My name's Stephen, I work in the communications unit at the Council and I'll be your host for tonight. Tonight's question and answer session will focus on community support and specifically volunteering. It would be fantastic if you could keep your live questions to this area of work we're doing around COVID-19. There'll be opportunities on future events to ask questions on other topics. I'll take you through a setup of how this will work before introducing you to tonight's panellists, who will be the ones answering your questions. I've got the easy job really, I'm merely asking them on your behalf. Right, here's the terms and conditions part. Please stay with me. I appreciate that if you joined us a fortnight ago for the first webinar, this will be a bit repetitive for you. But if you're joining us for the first time tonight, then you're in for a real treat. On the screen to my right, we have the live questions coming in. I'll be reading these out and our panellists will be answering them to you, the viewers. As well as the questions coming in live, we've had a great response to pre-session questions, so we'll be featuring these too. In relation to answers, the software that we're using allows us to reply both privately and publicly. So if you ask a question around, say, your own organisation's volunteering arrangements, this might be responded to you in electronic format privately. But if you ask a question around, say, community involvement with volunteering, then this might be something that's more appropriate for a public reply, so will be answered directly by the panel. For questions that we can't answer, we'll commit to getting you an answer within 3 days, hence why we asked for your email address during the registration process. And again, as we touched on, a recording will be made available after the event. Hopefully you're still tuned in after that. A couple more small points from me, and then we'll get going with your questions. Firstly, thanks for taking part tonight. This is a new way of communicating and hopefully you enjoy it. Secondly, our council has changed its structure to respond to this emergency. Instead of departments and services, we have cells. Each response service is working as a cell to allow us to protect our most vulnerable, to continue vital services and work on how we can move forward through this pandemic. So if you hear me or the panelists refer to cells throughout this session, then that's what we mean by it. It's effectively a temporary department in which we're all working in. Okay, let me introduce tonight's panel. We're joined by Kirsty Peden, who's heading up the community support cell during COVID-19. Kirsty, can you tell us a wee bit about your role in COVID-19?
Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everyone. Yep, my role is to lead the community support cell, and that cell is working with teams like the social work-led shielding team and the social work access team, the third sector and health, and a large number of community organisations to support people who perhaps are having to self-isolate or who are perhaps at risk financially and are struggling a bit and need that extra support. And through a joint response, what we do is find ways of being able to provide assistance. That could be through identifying volunteers to help them in their community, perhaps collecting shopping, or indeed through our community food provider network by providing emergency food parcels for individuals or families who are in need. So there's a range of support that we can offer, and I'm very happy, no doubt, we'll talk about it tonight.
Thanks very much. Also joining us tonight is Norma Hart, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway. Norma, thanks for joining us. Would you like to touch on your role within Third Sector D&G?
Thank you, Stephen, and hello to everyone on the webinar. Yes, my name's Norma Hart, and I run an organisation called Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway, TSDG, and our role is to support and advise the third sector, the voluntary sector in Dumfries and Galloway. And we do that in a number of ways. We do it by providing training and advice at roadshows. We have a really comprehensive communication strategy, and we also have a volunteering role. We are, in effect, the volunteering agency for Dumfries and Galloway. So when COVID-19 kicked off, we realised that we would have to focus more of our attention on volunteering for this period. At the same time, though, we provide funding advice on all the various funds that are available, and there's quite a lot of funding available at the moment, and so on. That's enough for now.
Thanks very much. And the final part of tonight's trio is Council Leader Lillian Money. Lillian, thanks for joining us this evening. Do you have anything that you would like to say to the viewers before we kick off with questions?
Thanks. Just welcome everybody to our webinar. As you say, I'm the political leader of the council. That's not to be confused with the chief executive, which sometimes people do get it confused with. I'm not in a cell, but there may be people who think I should be in a cell. And I'm one of the councillors for Nith Ward in Dumfries. And over the last 8 weeks, I've been learning an awful lot about how to talk to people through Zoom and Teams and how to do my job from home.
Thanks very much. There we are, that's tonight's panellists. So if we're all okay, we'll get going with tonight's questions. So Elaine, first question to yourself. The council have worked well with the community during this period, especially helping community food providers. This has been a great experience and takes me back to the early 90s where we all worked together and enhanced communities, working hard, hand in hand with volunteers. How can the council continue to support communities once we're out of COVID-19?
Well, I think one of the reasons that we've been coping reasonably well in Dumfries and Galloway is that we have a good tradition of working in partnership, whether that's partnerships with our statutory partners like the NHS and the police and fire, or whether that's with our communities or with the third sector like Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway. So we built on a very strong relationship here in the first place. I think when this is over, it won't finish quickly. We know that there will be a long-term repercussions from COVID, and I think we will need to maintain those relationships. There will be a need for the third sector and the voluntary sector to be strongly involved in future. And also the council is undertaking a transformation process. We've been looking at the way in which we deliver services and how those have to change. And I'm certain that both communities and the third sector will be extremely important as we transform the way in which our council operates.
Thanks very much. Kirsty, if we can come to you. What happens next in relation to resilience teams and their volunteers? Here in Karen Bridge, things are quieter as people get more home deliveries and so on. Do we have a plan on how we can take people to appointments, etc.?
Okay, Stephen, well, pleased to hear that there's someone from the Karen Bridge Resilience team's been in touch. Thanks very much for all that you're doing right now. Yes, and I'm also pleased to hear that maybe home delivery shopping slots have become a bit more accessible to the wider public. That seems to be a bit of a trend just now, that they're easier to come by, and that perhaps has eased a bit of the pressure on volunteers who've been doing shopping for their neighbours and people in their community. In terms of the sort of plan going forward, I think what we'd want to do is work with resilience team volunteers, and we're partners in the third sector, and take national guidance on just what's safe and appropriate for volunteers to be doing moving forward. I think in terms of giving lifts, etc., we'll wait until we've got better guidance nationally to be advising resilience teams around this. But I think there is opportunities moving forward to make use of the variety of offers that have come forward from communities for things like taking people to appointments that perhaps when they have to travel that wee bit further out of their community attend necessary appointments. In relation to PPE equipment, we've given guidance to resilience teams, and I'll put that if you're interested, maybe haven't had a chance to look at it. It's on the support hashtag Support-DG website. It's also available in third sector, and Norma might want to come in just to touch on that. But there's very clear guidance at the moment about the use of PPE, and to be honest, what we're recommending is that if you feel in the need to use PPE, then you're perhaps doing something you shouldn't quite be doing at the moment. So we're recommending not to be needing PPE equipment for most roles, but organisations will advise you around that specifically. But if indeed we got to the point where volunteers were carrying out roles that required PPE, then clearly we would be working with you to provide that type of equipment. Norma, I don't know if you want to mention something around
PPE, just to follow up what you've said, Kirsty, that we're following government guidelines, and in general, the volunteering tasks that the volunteers on our register are asked to do should not require PPE. We do ask in our guidance that volunteers follow the rules around social distancing and hand washing and everything that we know, but beyond that, we would not expect volunteers to do anything that would bring them at risk of contact. I wanted to add to what Kirsty had said about what we'll be doing in terms at Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway to support volunteers as we come out the lockdown. I think it's important for me to be clear that our main role is to provide volunteers to organisations who need them, rather than using volunteers ourselves. And the vast majority of volunteers on our register that have been used have been provided to local community resilience groups. So the support that we would provide for volunteers would in the main be to volunteer involving organisations. So we'll carry on doing that as we have been so far. We have a volunteer register, so if you think of us a bit like a job agency, but we're a volunteering agency, if you want to volunteer, you can register with us, and then we will try and match you with an organisation that's looking for volunteers. And we anticipate that third sector organisations coming out of lockdown will start to look for volunteers as time goes forward. So we'll carry on doing that. We've got a volunteering strategy which sets out the best practice for using volunteers. And to be honest, that hasn't really changed during COVID-19. We're still following the best practice that is accepted across Scotland and is promoted by Volunteer Scotland. And we back that up with training for volunteer and volunteer involving organisations. We're going to be doing more online webinars to support the sector. So that's exciting. And we're always willing to offer tailored help to any individual organisation that's looking for volunteers and wants help in how to look after their volunteers and make best use of them.
Thanks very much.
There is one more thing, Stephen. Sorry. I just want to mention, it was something Kirsty said. I thought I must remember to mention our community transport work. We are actually a partner in a community transport project with the council and with some local community transport providers. And I anticipate that there's going to be a surge in interest in both using and volunteering and working in community transport. So it's something that I think we'll be paying particular attention to coming out of lockdown.
Yeah. A question in from a volunteer with the People's Project. As we're being told to stay at home by the Scottish Government, are we still allowed to go out and weed, water flower tubs, etc. in the local community?
Yes, and we're delighted to hear that there's many community groups that are continuing with that kind of work. We've got a really strong kind of civic pride movement, if you like, across Dumfries and Galloway, with many organisations adding to the sort of local neighbourhoods and bringing their own spirit and colour to their areas. And I think we really appreciate, I think everybody really appreciates right now the work that people are putting in to making our environment look, better. And as we all probably exercise in our daily walks or cycles, then it's lovely to see, particularly when it's volunteers that have made that extra effort. So alongside our own grounds staff that have continued their activities throughout the time, then we would encourage for community organisations where they've got resilience teams or have been used to doing that type of work anyway, to continue with their litter picks or their bed plants that they fill often in tubs or particular planted areas within the community. It would of course be for each organisation to make their decisions around that, because I know that some resilience teams have got volunteers perhaps that are shielding or need to self-isolate, and obviously we'd want them to follow the national guidance. But we have got guidance for groups, and we will be working with you around support that we can provide, access to even I think what's coming could be the kind of bedding plants and advice and equipment and advice. So please just get in touch with us, because you'll have your kind of local ward officer contact that you would normally work with on this type of subject, or the local assets teams.
Thanks very much, Kirsty. Norma, you touched on third sector, Dumfries and Galloway, providing volunteers to organisations. I've had a live question. My son's finished college early this year. What opportunities are out there for young people to volunteer?
There are any number of opportunities. Young people are particularly welcome in lots of different communities and third sector organisations. At the moment, of course, a lot of third sector organisations have mothballed, have put their work on hold, particularly if they're not employing people, if they are dependent on volunteers. So in some respects, the range of opportunities isn't as wide, but there are opportunities to involve, probably most practically at local level in your local community. But if do you have a name? No, my son. If our listeners, viewers' son would like to go onto our website and contact us to let us know what he's interested in, then we will take that forward as quickly as we can.
So much.
It should, maybe if I just come in, Stephen, we, through Norma at Third Sector's website, we've had a really high volume of interest in volunteering, and I think that probably is rocketed in comparison to your normal levels of interest, and I think that's something to be very proud of in Dumfries and Galloway, that people have wanted to come forward and help others. And I know that we've matched many of them to local community resilience teams or food providers or other organisations that are providing support. But I'm also conscious, Norma, that there might be people watching who have registered who've not yet been matched, and maybe just to mention a bit about that, because I think
I mean, at the moment we have followed Volunteer Scotland's lead in freezing the active recruitment of volunteers, because we do have a lot of volunteers and the numbers of tasks for them not so many. However, I do not want to discourage anyone, particularly a young person, to step forward to volunteer, because if the opportunity is not there right now, it certainly will be. We know that as the lockdown eases up, people will start to return to work. When the schools go back, more people will return to work, and that means there'll be fewer volunteers. So you can still volunteer. We're just not actively pursuing volunteers.
Okay. Just a reminder, folks, that this is a live session, so by all means keep your live questions coming in. We'll go to one that came in beforehand now. In preparation for when we come out of lockdown, we need some funding for some furloughed staff to return to work. Until we're fully up and running, there's no income from the shop or visitor information points. This will take time, but we need our core staff to sort of reinstigate a phased return. How can we help?
Right. Thank you, and thanks to the person who asked this. It's quite a complex question, so bear with me. I've taken advice from a couple of different sources. I think it's in two parts. On the one hand, there's the question about furloughed staff, and it's important to know that if you do have furloughed staff, you can bring some back. You don't have to bring them all back. We also know that the furloughing rules are likely to change from the 1st of August. And I'm told that we anticipate that it's going to be possible to bring furloughed staff back on a part-time basis. We will have more information about that at the end of May. So those are both information and guidance that might be of use to people with furloughed staff who are also trying to manage their income. But I think it's also important to be aware that from August onwards, employers are going to be required to make a contribution. So the furloughing is going to ease off. It's going to taper down. From the point of view of staff who are on furlough, I would encourage anyone who has staff on furlough, my own, well, you don't have anyone on furlough, but if you have staff on furlough, please encourage them to take and assign them holidays during this period, so that when they come back, they're not then having a backlog of holidays to take. But I understand this point in particular is about, it's also about funding. And I think there probably are ways of looking at funding to support this organisation. And rather than get into the complexity of all the different funds that are available, I suggest that the person who's asked this question gets in touch with us, either directly with me. We have a funding officer, Rachel Kringen, who is expert in all the different funds, and we would then do a proper assessment of what was available.
Okay, thanks very much. The next question kind of leads on to that. Norma, it says, what funding is available to help support volunteers?
Yeah, well, I've already sort of trailed this, the answer to this. I've got several pages of notes here on what is available, and it's not complete. Overall, I would say that there are several substantial pots of money that are available to the third sector from the Scottish Government to support various types of activity for the third sector at the moment, specifically for COVID. There's, in particular, there's the Wellbeing Fund, which is targeted at organisations that are supporting the well-being of people and communities in the region. So the funding can be applied for anything from salaries to equipment. It can pay for food. If you're a food provider or a food distributor, it can cover travel costs and mental health support, lots and lots of different activities. It can also cover volunteer expenses. So I would encourage anyone who is struggling, any organisation or resilience group that's struggling, again, contact us or go straight to the Scottish Government website. It's quite comprehensively covered there. The other one that might be of interest is the Third Sector Resilience Fund, which again is aimed at third sector organisations, but it's to help them as third sector organisations sustain and be resilient at the end of COVID. So those are two in particular. One more. There's the Response, Recovery and Resilience Fund, which is it's very small amounts of money, 1,000 to 5,000, which could be a lot for a small organisation, but it's again to support immediate quick responses. You could buy, for example, tablets with the funding from this and handheld devices, whatever, to facilitate communication amongst local community groups. So lots out there. It needs a little bit of help navigating through it. So please contact us and we will do that.
There's quite a bit of information on the Support-DG website as well. There's links to
yes,
which will give you some information as to how to take those forward.
And which reminds me, thanks Elaine, we also have a DG resilience map, which is not just there to, the map is over 250 organisations who have presented themselves as offering support during the COVID, and you can click on the map and a balloon pops up and you get the information how to contact them. But it's also it is also an opportunity to ask for help using the map. So it can work both ways. But anyway, lots of help out there.
I think probably, Stephen, just so much or a number of questions have come in around the funding that I think it's probably worthwhile us doing a session on funding specifically for community organisations. And we were just talking earlier about how that might be one of the subject matters, if you like, for a webinar coming up in the next month. So it is an intricate and complex field, as community organisations tend to know. But I think we can probably try and provide some extra support to community organisations by just what we've got in various formats.
Not so much funding, Kirsty, but someone asks, can volunteers claim expenses?
Of course, and that's something that at any point in time, the council, certainly for those volunteers, and there are many that volunteer with the council throughout the year, not just for COVID, but always we would want to, as a good volunteering organisation. I'm sure Norma would be telling us off if we weren't providing expenses to volunteers. So currently, then all the community resilience teams, there's over 75 active community resilience teams, normally that are attached to a community council, and they have a kind of local plan. And the ad hoc subcommittee, of which Elaine chairs, has made awards through a fund called the hardship funding, and we have specifically provided, I think it's nigh on, certainly over £30,000 worth has gone out to those 75 community resilience teams for specifically to cover volunteer expenses. And that could be their travel or equipment that's required, or printing, for example, if they want to promote what they're doing, or devices like you've mentioned, Norma, and able to keep in touch with each other and communicate. So certainly our council has recognised that that's something that needs to be done. But I'm also conscious that within third sector, there's opportunities. I don't know if you want to mention anything around how expenses can be.
Well, we're the same. If we would encourage volunteers to claim expenses through the group that they're volunteering for, but if for whatever reason that doesn't work, and there's various ways that why it might not happen, we will certainly cover any volunteer expenses that are incurred through doing COVID-19.
I'll take another question that's come in beforehand, and then we'll move to the live screen to take a couple. Do you need insurance to volunteer?
You don't need to have insurance to be a volunteer, but certainly we would recommend that you are volunteering with an organisation that has insurance in place. And through the community support cell joint work that we're doing, then insurance is in place for all those 75 community resilience organisations. They're all insured under a policy that we provide normally to community councils out with the COVID response. But we've also got additional insurance in place with third sector to ensure that any third sector registered volunteers coming through the process are also insured as well. And that insurance covers them very specifically for activities that relate to the resilience plan. So it's not a blanket insurance of just volunteer for anything, but for COVID related specific activities, then they're insured, and that gives volunteers an element of protection. It's important to recognise what volunteers give up, and payment of expenses, travel expenses, and making sure they're insured is one way of us being able to do that.
The last question in. Is there online training available through either third sector or the council for volunteers, and is it free?
So, in terms of training for volunteers, we would normally expect, in normal circumstances, we would expect the organisation that's involving the volunteer to provide the training, and we would support them in doing that through guidance on best practice. In these circumstances, that's harder. So we have provided written guidance, which is on our website, but is also sent out to any volunteer that's registered with us to guide them through the COVID specific actions that they need to take and be aware of. But we are planning to do online webinar training for volunteer involving organisations, and we could certainly look at how we could involve volunteers in that.
Someone asks, I'm shielding, but I can do things at home. I've got a phone and a computer. What can I do to help?
And that's for me.
It's to the floor.
Well, because I've had a chance to think about it. I mean, I'm again very keen and want to welcome anyone who wants to volunteer if we can. These are circumstances that I think are going to come up more and more as the lockdown continues. And even if the lockdown eases, there will be a lot of people shielding who will want to be very cautious and stay at home, but will still want to volunteer. There's certainly some administrative duties that both we and other organisations could use some help with. But what I particularly wanted to mention is something that we're just about to launch, which is a telephone support service, which I think will probably be of interest to people who want to volunteer but are self-isolating at home. And the telephone support service is going to provide a low level of telephone support to people who have asked for just a wee bit of contact, bit of a check on their well-being. It wouldn't be providing a high level of professionally trained support for people with very serious mental health problems. That is being covered by the Health and Social Care Partnership. But we are launching a service this week and a bit more next week, because the initial response has been quite big, to provide a volunteer-based telephone support service to people in that sort of lower level of need. And whilst we're starting it with about a dozen volunteers, I suspect that the demand for that may increase, and that might be something that's of specific interest to someone shielding at home. So in short, be very happy to hear from this person, and I would encourage them to get in touch, and we would then take that forward.
Lillian, if I can come to yourself, what does the council do to recognise volunteers?
I think we have been trying to recognise the activities of volunteers actually right throughout the period of lockdown. We've had on our social media, we've had examples of good practice, either sometimes from staff, sometimes from volunteers, which is recognising the work they're doing. But we've also got Volunteer Week coming up at the beginning of June, and we would see that as an opportunity to recognise and thank the volunteers, whether they be staff or volunteers from the communities who have put so much effort in over the last several weeks. That will be an opportunity, and I know that there will be opportunities there for councillors in their own wards to recognise some of their local voluntary sector organisations and the work they've been doing. So, we want to take that opportunity to thank people and to recognise the value of the work that they've been doing.
I think that's important because throughout the year, certainly our council as a volunteering organisation, then we benefit from many different types of volunteers, whether that's in the archives, whether it's, as we've mentioned, with the Civic Pride, the amount of bedding plants and flower beds that are maintained by a range of groups across Dumfries and Galloway, that we'd want to make sure that we use, as the leaders mentioned, that Volunteer Week is a way of recognising that effort for throughout the year, as well as more recently. And I know that obviously Norma, you no doubt have plans for that too.
Well, that's right. I was going to just to add on that, of course, the Boskers event is a big feature in our calendar, and something that we look forward to every year because it's such a good opportunity to shout out for volunteers. But this year it's going to be a wee bit different for all sorts of obvious reasons. We're not going to be able to have a big event as we have done for the last few years, but we are definitely going to take the opportunity to thank volunteers, to showcase and profile what volunteers have been doing and volunteer involving organisations have been doing over the last year, but particularly the last few months, because we know just how big a job that's been. So to prepare for that, we are asking third sector organisations through social media, through our website, through our bulletin, and for anybody who's not signed up to our bulletin, please sign up to our bulletin. It's the best way of getting up-to-date information about what's going on in the third sector in Dumfries and Galloway. But every day we're asking organisations to send us the stories about the people who have been volunteering, the situations that they've been volunteering in, so that we can hold those together and really push them out and promote them during Volunteers Week, which is not that far off now. It's only a week on Monday. It starts on the 1st of June. So to anyone who's listening, please send us any information, photos, videos, anything like that that brings the story to life. It would be particularly welcome. We're still sending out volunteer certificates because that's another part of Volunteers Week that used to be quite a big part. So again, but we need to know if organisations want us to send them. So please let us know. We've already had quite a few organisations encourage us to do this. So we'll still be making a fuss during Volunteers Week, but in a slightly different way.
Thank you. We've got 3 or 4 more questions to go through. So if you've got any questions to come in live, and keep them coming, please. We've had another one in. What qualifications can you gain while volunteering locally?
Is that to me?
Maybe whilst you get into the specifics, I would probably say that volunteering is a fantastic opportunity, particularly for young people, to gain qualifications and recognition for learning or time that they spend generally doing things that they like. So, you know, for example, within the council, there's offer opportunities to do your Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which is recognised nationally. There's the John Muir Award. There's a whole host of awards through YouthLink Scotland that can be accredited for younger people, and right down to sort of P7 age ranges. You know, it's not typically your kind of older senior school these days. A range of young people can access those, and indeed so can adults who undertake equivalent of SVQs. I don't know, Norma, if you have maybe specific programmes, but certainly whilst the council has a range of volunteers, even, you know, running museums or contributing to our art galleries and places like that, then it's important to offer sort of qualifications and training wherever possible, and we work with partners generally to do that.
And let me add to that, Kirsty, thanks. The Saltire Awards is a fantastic programme for young people. It's a level that goes bronze, silver, gold, and beyond for a number of hours of volunteering. It's a really good way of finding out if you like working or trying out work. If you're a bit older, trying work in a different settings. So the Saltire is particularly useful for young people. As far as qualifications go, it will very much depend on the organisation that you're volunteering for. You may well be able to get health and safety qualifications, IT qualifications. Many volunteering jobs require you to have a PVG check, protection of vulnerable groups check, and so that can be another useful tool to take with you if you want to move on to a job. And it can be a fantastic route to a career if you want to start or change a career at any time in your life.
Other question in beforehand. Why can I not volunteer for a private business when I get universal credit?
Yes, well, this was a bit of a puzzle, this question. And I've done a little bit of research and asked a couple of people about this. So my best knowledge is that there is no reason why you cannot volunteer and get universal credit. Now, the part of the question that is slightly takes us off at a tangent is, why can I not volunteer for a private business? Now, there's no law that says you cannot volunteer for a private business. Our guidance is generally, if a private business would normally pay someone to do a job, then they should pay someone to do a job and not use a volunteer. However, I recognise that there have been exceptions to that during the coronavirus, where, for example, rural shops have provided food parcels, and those have been delivered from the shop by volunteers to individuals. So it can happen, of course, in exceptional circumstances. But generally speaking, we would say volunteering for a private business, well, it's your choice, but you know, you can volunteer for this fantastic range of third sector organisations that really, really need you. So But the question on universal credit, as far as I'm aware, there is no reason why you cannot do that. So I suggest either going back to Citizens Advice or the Job Centre, or indeed come to us and we would follow it up.
A follow-up question, and which I assume relates to the training guidance that we touched on 5 or 10 minutes ago. Norma, it says, is this only for volunteers registered with third sector?
The online training that I talked about.
Yeah.
Most of the training will be directed at third sector organisations that use volunteers. So if individual people are interested in volunteering, we'd be very happy to talk to them about that. It's because we haven't finalised the programme, it's difficult for me to say no to that, because I would always want volunteers to feel welcome with us. But the training will be in the context of organisations that need volunteers. So that would be my starting point.
I'll take a couple more questions. In what ways can we ensure that the huge increase in the number of volunteers can be retained as a positive and as a lasting legacy of COVID-19?
I think it's going to be difficult, because as Norma said earlier on, as people go back to work, quite a lot of people who are volunteering at the moment are people who've been furloughed, or would not be able to, or maybe are working from home and are able to restructure their working day a bit. But as people return to work, it will be a little bit more difficult. But the demand will still be there. I mean, the food train, which Norma's organisation matched me up with, have had an increase in their clients by something like 75%. Now, when people go back to work, those people will probably still want to remain with the food train, because they're older people who require shopping to be done.
Yeah.
And actually, there will be a need to continue to recruit and bring in volunteers and try and keep some of the volunteers we've got. Now, we don't know when people are going to go back, and we don't actually know how people are going to work in the future, because things will change as a result of this. But there definitely will be a need, because I think we are identifying areas of need we didn't know anything about before, and therefore there will be a need to continue to sustain those individuals and those communities.
That's a really good summary of how we're seeing things. We also anticipate that because of the relatively high percentage of older people that we have in our population, that the number of people who will want to continue shielding and self-isolating will probably continue for the foreseeable future, until they feel safe, that it's safe not to do so. And so the need for volunteer support will continue. I mean, we've been thrilled by the response that we had to our volunteer recruitment at the beginning of this, and we have really tried hard to communicate with our volunteers all through this, but also to be realistic about the fact that the response we've had has outweighed the actual demand for tasks, and in many ways that's a good thing. So in anticipation of the lockdown easing, and we know the Scottish Government are going to make an announcement this week, which will probably take effect next week, we are going to contact all the volunteers on our on our register, and just ask them, in view of the likely changes that are coming and the relaxation of the lockdown, do you want to continue to be on our register, on the understanding that we're not quite sure exactly what the demand will be, and that's really all we can do at this point.
I'm confident, Stephen, that the legacy that one of the really positive legacies, if you like, of this time is going to be how we take forward the kind of volunteering and community resilience effort that has really sprung up, and just the kindness that's been shown by local people and communities towards each other. I think we're a strength before we started, yeah. But I think if anything that D&G, even looking nationally at across or other local authority areas, we've got a really strong basis of volunteering and that type of support to work with in the future.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the questions. Thank you all for your time this evening. I think that was a fabulous insight into your respective roles and how you're all playing a part in supporting our communities right across the region. Elaine, can come to you first. Any closing remarks for the viewers?
Well, I'm assuming that most of the people who are probably involved in this webinar are people who are involved with volunteering, and really just to thank people for that, because as we've been saying, it's something that Dumfries and Galloway is really good at, and we've been good at that for a long time, and I think we're getting the benefit of that now. I think, you know, I'm very proud of Dumfries and Galloway. I'm very, very proud of the people of Dumfries and Galloway and the way that they've responded to this pandemic, and I just want to say thanks on behalf of the elected members of the council to everybody who's contributed to that.
Norma, anything from yourself?
Similarly, we are just so grateful to the people of Dumfries and Galloway who have volunteered, but also to the immense amount of volunteering that goes on by individual to individual, one-to-one, we call it one-to-one, peer-to-peer volunteering, by people who are not registered with us. And the numbers of those will, I'm sure, far outweigh the numbers that we have got on our register. So thanks to those, thanks to all the community organisations that have really stepped up the plate in responding to this crisis that has taken us by such surprise.
Kirsty, anything from yourself?
Just to echo the thanks, but also to say get in touch if you've got any queries or questions that even after this or that sparked an interest or a thought, then just, you know, get in touch with us through our DG support mailbox, through our website, or to any of the, you know, the kind of partner organisations, because we're very keen to do whatever we can as a council and as a partnership to make volunteering to enable it to continue and to support communities to look after themselves as they're doing very ably right now.
Okay, so the final thank you tonight is for you, the viewers. Thanks for your participation. We've committed to delivering an online event such as this on community support every 2 weeks throughout COVID-19 using this exact Q&A format, with the next one taking place on Tuesday the 2nd of June at 7 PM. I won't forget that one, that's my wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thanks once again for taking part. Stay safe out there, folks. Goodbye for now.